child development can certainly be viewed as a biological process, as Arnold Giselle proposes. What I like about his maturational theory is that it refers to biology, opposed to genetics or heredity, as with it is often associated. In fact, biology is all-encompassing. Our environment and society can be described from a biological standpoint. This avoids a nature versus nurture debate and recognizes development for what it is, a multifaceted complexity of the most intricate clockwork. Yet, Giselle also proposes that children alternate between having a good year and a bad year. I've yet to find any credible research supporting this theory. Is he suggesting that there's an immediate switch of direction at one's birthday? Or a new calendar year? Or the first day of school? Or some other sequential point? Perhaps it was a mere observation. If this is the case, though, it might have been his own altering perception that accounted for this. I recognize the existence of biological rhythms, such as through our sleep, and each one's day, and the months that pass us, and every year we experience, so I'm not completely unaccepting of such an idea, but it seems unfounded, really. I'm more familiar with Erik Erikson's theories, and they are generally compatible with my beliefs. For instance, he proposes that conflicts foster change. I believe this is also compatible with Jean Piaget's theory of assimilation and accommodation. For example, a child must apply a pre-existing conception to a unique situation, which is often problematic if the context of that situation requires a new perspective. Such conflicts make children accommodate for their belief structures, which is essentially defined as change. Thus, in this regard, I feel they are congruent. I feel they're congruent theories anyway, but as far as the stages that each proposes, I can agree with Erik Erikson's ideas of internal battles, but I think I could eventually present an equally compelling construction. While Piaget also has a unique perspective of stages from a different standpoint, I think we could describe development in multiple other ways, too. Life is too complex to simply adopt a single model of development. As a student of psychology, they are all incredibly invaluable. At least I'm better able to grasp the definitions associated with each stage, which is probably the most important part of understanding them. For instance, object permanence is a real phenomenological expansion for an infant, regardless of identifying a stage in which it occurs. Ultimately, I think life stages are oversimplified and loosely defined at best. I do not believe each stage is like a level in a computer game where we must complete one level to move on to the next, as they seem to propose. Rather, I see it as much more natural spectrum. I tend to frown upon forcing stages into boxes. At the same time, I do recognize the seeming discontinuity of quickly growing child. For this reason, I believe that younger ages would require more stages, if one were to feel the need to construct such a schema. However, I believe there would just as easily be stages throughout adulthood. As a child develops, it would become more difficult to account for all the socio-environmental changes happening concurrently. For this reason, it makes clear-cut stages harder to identify in adults. Perhaps they would branch out like a tree as we each take a different path of life choices. Nevertheless, we are constantly developing. I believe this is a problem with traditional views of human development. Abraham Maslow, he's brilliant too. His impact is far-reaching. I've been enlightened by his views of multiple intelligences, which, although have evolved to include more domains, is a large part of how I design my curriculum as an English lecturer in Thailand to meet the needs of my diverse learners. Still, I have a hard time taking boxes and pyramids with clearly defined lines separating these overlapping concepts. I disagree that self-actualization is reached after love and esteem. I think it is splitting hairs, really. These are interrelated developmental processes and are often occurring simultaneously. Out of all the major developmental views, I can relate most to Erickson's eternal battles best. He proposes that we have struggles in a set path starting with trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame, initiative versus guilt, industry versus inferiority, identity versus role confusion, intimacy versus isolation, generativity versus stagnation, and integrity versus despair. Nevertheless, in reality, these are battles that persist throughout our lives. I've dealt with ones that have not supposed to come yet while still battling those with which were supposed to be already completed to get this far. So I look at these as more as lifetime struggles of the human psyche. Nevertheless, I like the dichotomy of each, the opposing forces creating our personalities and who we are. There's an obvious correlation between his views and Freud's, but Erickson's stages are more overarching and general, making it easier to apply across socio-cultural realms, from country to country and the past to our future. Different people battle each one differently, and we could probably come up with dozens of even hundreds more. Freud's construct is seemingly specific to his own struggles in a more temporal and cultural locality. Regardless, in order to progress in this field, I must understand the foundation of the knowledge I seek. I think it is necessary to see the universe through the eyes of the giants who came before us, as only then can I begin to share my views with the world around me.